make our chocolate layer cake from start to finish, we're going to use a couple box mixes of chocolate cake for the cake portion. For that, we'll need eggs, oil, and water. We're going to coat our layers with a simple vanilla syrup, so we'll need that, a simple syrup. And then we are going to fill the cakes with a special whipped chocolate mixture. For that, we'll need whipping cream, instant chocolate pudding, and milk. We'll finish off the cake with a chocolate frosting, and for that, we'll need confectioner's sugar, shortening, cocoa, vanilla extract, and butter or margarine. I have here most of the equipment we'll need to make our layer cake. There are a few specialty items that I'll discuss as we get to them in the process of making the cake. But you can see that we'll need some mixing bowls. You'll want an electric mixer, whether that's a hand mixer or a stand mixer. I have some 10-inch round cake pans with very straight sides, which when layering your cake is very helpful. I also have dry measuring cups, liquid measuring cups, measuring spoons, a straight edge spatula, a rubber scraper, and custard cups. The purple strips of fabric that you see are called bake even strips, and they are a key element in making a layer cake. We'll discuss those more when we get to that point in the process. Before we even begin to mix our cake batter, it's important that we prepare our pans and preheat our oven so that the pans are ready to go into the oven as soon as the cake is finished being mixed. In order to prepare the pans, the directions say to grease and flour the pans. But there's a creation out there that is even better than greasing and flouring, and it's called pan grease. Pan grease can be purchased, but it's just as easily made at home. You can make as little or as much as you need. It will store for a few months at room temperature, but it'll store twice as long in the refrigerator. So you can get about 3 months at room temperature in an airtight container, or about 6 months refrigerated. So we're gonna make it from equal parts flour, oil, and shortening. So I've measured a half cup of each of those ingredients. And then we're gonna beat it together with the hand mixer until it is all one homogeneous mixture. So there's a half cup of oil. So see, that's why I said you can make as little or as much as you need. If you use it a lot, you can make a big batch and just store it. Or you can make just enough to get by on what you need for that day's cake baking. So we're gonna take our hand mixer. Remember, when you're using a hand mixer, don't turn it on until the beaters are in the mix in the bowl, and don't turn it off or don't remove the beaters from the bowl until after you have turned it off. Now that we have a smooth, homogeneous mixture, we're ready to use it to prepare our pans. So to use the pan grease in our cake pan, I'm going to use a silicone pastry brush, and I like that mostly because it holds up to cleaning in the dishwasher very well. And we are just going to generously coat our cake pan. The biggest thing is I make sure that I get into the grooves of the pan where the sides meet the bottom, because that's a place where cake often sticks. And it's very disheartening to do all the work to get the cake in the oven, out of the oven properly, and then have it fall apart when you bring it out of the pan. But the pan grease really helps with that. So you can see I am being generous with the application of it. And then we're going to do the sides of the pan as well. Until both pans are completely coated. Here we have our 2 cake pans completely coated with pan grease. And I forgot to mention earlier, one of the other advantages of pan grease is that it's a lot less messy than greasing and flouring the pan, because I don't end up with flour all over my counter or my sink. So I'm going to do one more thing just to ensure that my cakes come out of the pans with ease. And I'm going to line the bottom of the pan with parchment paper. And it's okay that the pan grease is in there, because it's just going to help hold the parchment paper in place. And this will just be one more layer of insurance that my cakes are going to come out just right from the pan. So you could cut the parchment paper to fit, but I've bought pre-cut parchment circles the size of my cake pan. So go ahead and place those in, and now my pans are ready as soon as my batter's ready. Because we are layering our cakes, we are going to mix them slightly differently than the directions on the box. So I'm still going to start off with the cake mix, but some of the amounts are going to be a little different. This just helps make a denser, more easily stacked, and safely tiered cake. So I need to add 1 cup of water, a 1/4 cup of oil, and 3 eggs, 3 large eggs. Remember, when most recipes call for an egg, they mean a large egg. That's especially important to realize in baking, so that you have the right ratio of liquids and dry ingredients. So now, with all those ingredients in, we're going to bring it together for about 30 seconds, and then using a timer, we're going to beat it on a medium speed for 2 minutes. So just on low while we bring them together. I turn the bowl so I get to all the ingredients. Get everything mixed in fairly quickly. And then now that all the ingredients are together, I'm going to mix for 2 minutes on medium. So because of the size pan I use, it's perfect for 1 box mix. And that's kind of why I like the 10-inch pans. I don't have to measure how many cups of batter I put in. If I use smaller or larger cake pans, I would need to measure this in a liquid measuring cup and add the right amount of batter so that my cakes bake up evenly and fill the pan well without overflowing into the oven. We want our cakes to be the same size, same height, or very close, if not exact. And so I want to make sure that I get all of this cake batter into this pan. And then I'm going to lightly tap my cake pan on the counter to get any bubbles in the batter to move to the top and leave the batter. Now we're ready to place our bake even strips around our pan. Before placing this around the pan, this has been soaking in cool water for about 30 minutes. And when I took it out of the water, I squeezed as much of the excess water out as I could. I just want them to be damp, not dripping. And then there's a little hook. Sometimes you'll find these with Velcro, but this one happens to have a little piece of fabric that it hooks through, and a second one to tuck the end in. And we want to make sure these are nice and secure. What these do is they help the cake to bake evenly and not have a dome in the center of the cake when it's done. And that's because without them, the outer portion of the batter would heat up more quickly. And as it heats and cooks, it pushes batter that's uncooked towards the center, creating that dome, which then is eventually baked into place. So now that I have these ready to go, we'll put them in our 325 degree preheated oven. When placing your cakes in the oven, it's important to remember a few things. First of all, you want the rack that your cakes get placed on to be level. So make sure that it's not crooked in two different threads of the oven wall. Secondly, we want to make sure that the rack is centered in the oven. That means top to bottom. And then we're going to place our cakes in a way that allows circulation to happen. If I was only putting one pan in, I would place it on the center of that centered rack for the best air circulation. Because I'm placing two cakes in, I'm going to put them, notice they're at a slight diagonal to each other. And I want to also make sure that they're at least 2 inches away from each oven wall and 2 inches away from each other. A great way to measure that is by looking at the wires on the rack. Notice how my cake pan on the left towards the front is no further over than the last wire before the frame of the rack. And so that way I know I have those couple of inches for air to circulate properly and really bake my cakes well. So these cakes baked in a 325 degree oven for 40 minutes. And to test them for doneness, I put a toothpick in the center, and it had to come out clean, which means the toothpick looked just like it had never been put into anything. So that's what a toothpick comes out clean means. Now I'm going to set these on wire racks in the pan to cool for about 10 minutes. After my cakes have cooled for about 10 minutes, I'm going to take them, I want to get them out of the pan to finish cooling. So to do that, I'm going to take an extra cooling rack or a cake circle or a flat baking sheet, and I'm going to put it upside down over my cake pan so that I can flip it onto that surface gently. See, didn't that pan grease do a great job? My cake came out perfectly. And then just to be extra careful, we did the parchment circle, and it looks perfect. Now I want this to cool off right side up. So I'm going to take that original cooling rack, flip it once more, and now my cake is ready to finish cooling before I do anything else with it. I like to wrap them up and let them sit for a day so that if there's any compression that's going to happen, any air that's going to leave, it happens before I put any icing on. So I'm going to take my other one out of the pan and let these finish cooling before I wrap them up and save them for the next step. For our chocolate layer cake, we're going to do something special for the filling between the layers. And we're going to tort the cake. So that means we're going to end up with 3 filled layers in our chocolate cake. So in addition to some icing, we're going to put a very rich chocolate pudding in. And we make it rich by choosing rich dairy ingredients. So what I have is just instant chocolate pudding, 2 packages of the 3.5 ounce boxes, and I'm just putting those into the bowl. We're going to use our hand mixer. Stand mixer would be okay, but I would say you wouldn't want to whisk this. And then I need 2 cups of heavy whipping cream and 1 cup of milk. So I've measured my 1 cup of milk already in a liquid measuring cup, and my heavy whipping cream is 1 pint, and 1 pint is 2 cups, so I don't have to actually measure my heavy whipping cream to get the right amount. I just need to pour it into my bowl. Now, because I know heavy whipping cream sticks and I cannot scrape the inside of my container, I'm going to take just a little bit of that milk That's gonna all go in, everything in that cup's gonna go in my recipe. And I'm gonna use it to kind of rinse out any additional heavy whipping cream that might have been in that container. Since the milk's thinner, it's gonna run out a little better, and it'll bring the heavy whipping cream with it. And then we're gonna go ahead and add the rest of that milk. And because I can scrape my liquid measuring cup, we're gonna go ahead and scrape that milk in there. So I need to beat this on low for about 30 seconds till it's combined, and then I'm gonna beat it for about 2 minutes on a medium to high speed to really incorporate some nice air in the mixture. So you can see this is a nice thick texture. It's gonna set up really great inside our cake layers. Now we'll make our frosting for our chocolate cake. So I'm gonna use my stand mixer, and I'm gonna use the whisk attachment. And I'm going to make a chocolate buttercream. So I'm gonna start with a cup of shortening. Make sure that all gets into the bowl. And then I also need a cup or 2 full sticks of butter. And these are softened. I let them sit on the counter for a little bit so they get squishy. Softened is not melted. It should not be liquid, it should just be squishy. Okay, and then we're gonna snap that bowl in place on the mixer. Attach our whisk attachment. Bring the bowl up. And turn our mixer on low to beat the 2 fats together. Next, I need to add my vanilla and my cocoa. I'm gonna add my vanilla first. So I have 2 teaspoons of imitation vanilla extract. Increase the speed as the ingredient gets mixed in, which is fine because we want to have a nice whippy texture, airy texture to our icing when we're finished. So I'm going to start this on low speed, and I'm going to gradually add the cocoa next. Now my cocoa's been mixed in pretty well. Before I go to the next step, which is to start adding my powdered sugar, I want to scrape the sides and bottom of the mixing bowl so we loosen anything that may have gotten stuck under the beater. So now I'm going to start adding my powdered sugar. It says about a cup at a time. And I'm going to estimate because the recipe says 8 cups of sifted powdered sugar, about 2 pounds. And the powdered sugar I have is a 2-pound bag. So I'm going to put about 1/8 of that in and mix that on low. And then I'll continue to add powdered sugar as it's mixed in. But my main goal is to avoid a big cloud of powdered sugar. Every so often I need to pause, lower the bowl, and scrape. And it's going to look really dry when we have the powdered sugar in, but we need all 2 pounds. to go into our recipe, and then we'll add milk. And the addition of that milk will make the icing look better and spread better. Right now, without the milk, it's going to be so thick it would actually tear your cake apart, and we definitely don't want that. So I'm going to raise the bowl back up. A little bit of powdered sugar. And just enough speed to get it mixed in without a powdered sugar cloud. All right, so it's pretty well mixed in. I'm going to add a little bit of milk, and I'm going to start again on that lower speed. About half of my milk. All of this is going to end up going in because of the consistency of icing that I need, and maybe even a little more. You can see a lot of the icing is stuck inside the whisk. So after I get the milk mixed in, I put the mixer up to a higher speed. That's going to help move it out of the whisk and into the bowl. All right, so I want to check my whisk attachment here. I'm gonna help any icing that's in there back out into my mixing bowl. I'm gonna scrape the sides and the bottom. So anything that's in here, I want to get in the bowl. And sometimes it can be difficult to work around the pin of the mixer, so occasionally you have to take it off of the stand to get it scraped out properly. So I've gotten everything scraped down into my bowl. As I scraped, I noticed that a bunch of powdered sugar had gotten trapped under the icing that was coming together. And so it's a good thing that I took it off of the mixer and really worked to get everything back up and out and ready to go. So now we're gonna mix this on a higher speed till it's smooth. So now my frosting is smooth, and it's also light and fluffy. It's not a bad texture, so I think I'm going to stop with that. I'm not going to add any more milk. I could always add more if I don't like the way it's spreading when I start with it tomorrow, or on the day I ice my cake. So I'm going to take this off, clean out the attachment, and fill a bag with a pastry bag with some of the frosting. All right, I need to fit an icing bag, a piping bag, with a special piece called a coupler. And that's this little white portion. What it does is it allows me to change out the tip without having to clear all the icing out of the bag. So I'm going to take the screw off, drop the inner piece into the bag, point it down, and move it all the way to the tip of that bag. Kind of let it make a little mark. Take my scissors, kind of score it. Oh, there we go, we got it. So I want it to be all the way down, but I don't want it to come out of the bag. Now I can take my number 12 tip that I want to start with, and I can put the coupler on, and it's ready to fill the bag. But if I want to change to, say, a number 18 star tip and do something different with the same icing, then I can just swap it out. So that's why the coupler is so handy. So we just need this with the 12 on it. And then we're going to fold the bag back so that it's open. And I'm going to hold it with my hand under the bag. And I'm going to use a rubber scraper to fill the bag. I only want to fill it about halfway. I can always refill it later, but I only want to fill it about halfway so that it stays in the bag when I'm working with it and doesn't come back out the top. And these bags actually come with a little line. Kind of went above the line a little bit, you can see. So then I want to twist this, kind of squeeze any air out, twist it at the top, and I hold that twist in between my thumb and forefinger. And then when I want the icing to come out of the tip, I squeeze with my entire hand. So you can see it's coming out. And then as I work, I twist the bag, and that pushes the icing towards the tip. Always keeping that twist in between my thumb and forefinger. Now while this icing sits, it's a good idea to keep it covered with a damp dish towel so it doesn't dry out. And if you're going to need to store it overnight, it should be covered with plastic wrap and refrigerated because of the butter and the milk in the ingredients. So now we'll get ready for the next step. I'm going to get my cake circles ready for my final assembly. And if you look at the cardboard circles, you can kind of see grooves that go in them. And what I want to do to make them a little bit stronger is I want to turn those at 90-degree angle to themselves. You can kind of see the lines on the front too. And then I'm going to wrap these two together, crisscrossed in foil, to put my cake on. So I have a nice big piece, roll of foil. I want to do this in one piece. So I'm going to take those doubled cake boards and bring the foil to the bottom side. Fold everything, keeping it as flat as possible as I fold it. And then it has a nice smooth look. So this is where we're going to put our cakes when we assemble them. All right, now we're going to level our cake first, and then we're going to cut it in half using the same tool. We're going to cut it in half so that we can tort our cake. And a level surface is easier to decorate and to stack. So I have a cake a leveler. Has a little wire that runs across. You need to make sure that they're on the same mark on either side. It'll cut up to a 10-inch cake. I would suggest probably not using this for a homemade cake or from a recipe. Those tend to be dense and more heavy, and it may actually end up breaking the tool instead of cutting. So in that case, you would use a serrated knife. So we just need to take this evenly and carefully across. And then we're going to lift and remove that cake that we've cut off. You could, if you wanted to not waste this, you could take this and make it into cake balls. Just mix it with some icing, roll them, freeze them, and then dip them in chocolate. So there's my level surface, and I'm gonna move my wire so that I can cut this exactly in half to tort it. Now I've adjusted the wire on the cake cutter, and I'm gonna take it across the cake again, this time to split my layer into 2 pieces as even as possible. The nice thing about this cake splitter is it tends to make fewer crumbs. So now I have 2 layers of cake that I can work with for my assembly. And I want to make sure that my cake stays moist over the process of assembling it, because it's taking a few days. So I've got a simple vanilla syrup. You could make your own simple syrup, just equal parts sugar and water. And I'm going to take a pastry brush, and I'm going to brush those layers with that simple syrup to make sure that they stay moist. So get these all coated, and then I'll be ready for the next step. So now you can see kind of the glisten of the simple syrup on my cut layers, and we're one step closer to assembling our cake. All right, so to start my cake assembly, I'm gonna take my cake circles that I covered, and I'm gonna put a little bit of my icing on the bottom that would cover most of my circle of cake to seal the bottom of the cake. And then I'm going to take one of my layers and place it on there. And center it before I add any more layers. And then we're going to get a specialty tool. This is a turntable. Give you a better view. And the first thing we're going to do, so we are at the point now where we are torting the cake. Okay, we've put the simple syrup in to keep it moist. And now on the edge, I'm going to run one line of frosting, and that's going to act as a dam to keep everything in that I'm going to put in there. So this is our pudding filling that we made the other day, and I'm going to spread that all over. It's really important when you're spreading icing or this filling that you never move your spatula or scraper directly up. Always at an angle to leave the surface of the frosting or the filling so that you don't tear the cake. Always at an angle when you leave. So I'm putting about 1/3 of my filling in here. And there's a lot of things that you could do with this. You could just simply do icing in between every layer, and it would still be a tort. But this just gives us an opportunity to do something a little extra fancy. This pudding is almost mousse-like. It's so rich. So I do want it to be even. That's important because that way it'll be even when I get to the top. Kind of smooth that out. And now we're going to take another layer and put it on top, centered. And you might want to tape down your base to your turntable to make it a little bit safer to work with. To do it so that a bottom of a cake is on the bottom of the first thing I put down. But then I like the bottom of the second cake to actually be the top of the cake, because it gives a nice guaranteed flat surface to work with if I'm decorating. Cake is all assembled, we're ready for our crumb coat of icing. So I'm going to put some icing on the top and on the sides. And I'm going to use a small spatula to do most of that with. Make sure you keep the crumbs out of your bowl of icing so that you can use it for the final coat. This is just going to be thin to trap the crumbs. That's why it's called a crumb coat. And then we're going to chill this overnight, which will make the final icing much simpler. So this is not a very thick coat. This is just enough to seal the cake and trap those crumbs in so that tomorrow or a few hours later after we've let it chill, I'll make sure I get this crumb coat all the way down to the bottom. After we've had some time to let it chill, then it'll be easy to finish coating it. Now that my cake, my torted cake, has had a chance to chill in the refrigerator overnight, we're going to, with that crumb layer, we're going to add a little more icing, just enough to make sure we cover so that we don't see any of the cake coming through. And then we're going to add some to the top, and then we're going to finish off the edges. So again, I can't mention it often enough that whenever you're moving icing, you want to make sure that you always come off of the icing at an angle, because that'll keep it smooth. I did, since this icing was made yesterday, I did whip it up fresh with the stand mixer. And because it had to be stored in the refrigerator due to the butter and the milk, I also let it come to room temperature for a few minutes before I beat it. So I'm gonna start with that on the top. And I'm gonna go to the sides and add some more, making sure that I add all the way down the cake. And then we want it to be even and smooth when we're finished with the sides. So I'm going to add to the bottom here first because that can be a little bit harder to get to sometimes. So depending on how you want to finish the cake, you may want to take that icing bag again with frosting in it, that piping bag, and you could do dots on the edges. Make sure that you stop piping before you remove it. That's how you avoid the little peaks. Or we can switch the tip and get some other effects. So I'm going to switch to a 22 tip, which is a star tip. And remember that coupler makes this a really simple task. With that star tip, I can make stars, or I can make shells. The shells are actually my favorite. So I'm going to go ahead and take off these other edges. And you don't have to have the turntable that I have this on. It just makes it very nice, much easier to get a lot of these tasks done. If you don't have the turntable, you'll just have to turn your cake a lot. So if you're going to make a lot of cakes, a turntable would be a worthwhile investment. So I can put shells at the bottom again. But I think what I want to do is we're going to take some jimmies or sprinkles, some chocolate ones, kind of stick with the theme here. And we're going to add those to along the sides of the bottom of the cake. Here's our finished layer cake. You can see the top would be perfect for decorations or even something as simple as writing. It has a lot of different accents. And it's torted with some delightful flavors on the inside as well.